people coming into our virtual auditorium go up, and it's going up quickly, but we need to wait about 30 seconds or so in order to let everybody in before we actually start. The numbers are already up to 77, Farzine. 83, we have a good audience and a very prompt one. We just hit 100. People are pouring in. So we will wait another few seconds, and it looks like it's beginning to slow down now. So I think we can actually begin. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Wilmette Institute's recurring webinar series. Our objective is to highlight the immense diversity of the Baha'i teachings and the ways they contribute to the contemporary world, particularly to the prevailing discourses of society. In today's session, we have the privilege of listening to Dr. Farzine Aghdassi as he delves into the theme of artificial intelligence and ethics. Our webinars are free, live streamed on YouTube, and accessible later on SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple podcasts. We hope you enjoy the program and invite you to share it with others, and of course, let others know about this program. A quick note here, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen for any questions, but we will wait until after the presentation and address them at that time. Now, let me make a couple of announcements before we actually introduce the speaker. We have coming up at the Wilmette Institute 4 courses that it's going to be offered through the Graduate Theological Union of Berkeley, California, starting about, I think it's January 30th of 2024. The 4 courses are Reconstructing Blackness, Anti-Racism and Unity in the U.S., Approaches to Nonviolent Social Change, Introduction to Baha'i Theology, and Introduction to the Baha'i Faith, sort of Baha'i Intro 101. For people interested in taking these courses, for credit, if you're a student at Graduate Theological Union, there's a little bit.ly here on the screen, which you might want to write down or photograph, and that will take you to SONIS, which is the course catalog, and then you have to select Wilmette Institute for the campus in order to come up with these particular courses. If you're a student at the University of California at Berkeley, email Chitra Golestani at cgolestani@wilmetteinstitute.org. Both graduate and undergraduates are welcome to apply. The course is offered at both levels, and there's more information at the Wilmette Institute's webpage at gtu.edu. In addition to this, let me also mention our upcoming extension courses, which are non-credit courses, and upcoming webinars. We have 2 upcoming courses, one starting in 2 days, Cultivating Capabilities of Transformative Leadership, and another one a week after that, Thursday the 15th of November, Writing Biographies and Histories, the latter being a course helping people who have a biography to write or a history to write or a memoir to write to learn about the ethics, learn about the sort of etiquette of how to write these things, and to consult with professional authors to gain their experience in the course. Finally, we have one webinar coming up before the end of 2024, the Rache Amma in Living Color by Karen Webb, a student at the United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, a Baha'i working on her master's degree. And that particular course is going to be on Sunday, December 10th, so a little over a month from now, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. Now, of course, let's move on and introduce our speaker so that we can actually hear our speaker today. We're quite anxious to get started on that. Farzine Aghdassi, a longtime Baha'i pioneer to Africa, intimately involved in the development of the training institute process in Southern Africa and, of course, now in North America. He was in Southern Africa for 19 years as a university professor of engineering. In the United States, he has served as a Continental Counselor for the Americas and is now Secretary of the Regional Baha'i Council for California. He has a PhD in electrical engineering and specializes in computer vision and artificial intelligence. And of course, that's exactly the topic he will cover today when he talks about artificial intelligence and ethics. Currently, he's working for a large AI company in the Silicon Valley, right in California near GTU. Thank you so much for joining us, Farzeen. We're really excited to have you with us tonight, and we look forward to your presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen and we will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Let me share screen here and see how this might work. Yeah, let me put this in presentation mode. I hope you can see my screen. So when the Wilmette Institute invited me to consider talking about this subject, I was trying to balance, because both of these subjects are such deep subjects, and you're all familiar with the amount of public discourse that is now talks about artificial intelligence, and of course ethical questions are all around us. The news, the media, the stories of war and peace, numerous stories are all laden with subject matters that are really have a direct bearing on how we want to live our lives as far as ethics is concerned. So what I will do in this talk is to first maybe lay out a conceptual framework, a framework that can guide us not only in what we talk about in this webinar, but also in the way we act in our lives. So that's the conceptual framework I will talk a little bit about. Then I will introduce a number of systems that are commonly referred to as artificial intelligence systems, talk about their genesis. My hope is to demystify this subject. The problem that many thinkers refer to as the alignment problem has to do with the fact whether the purpose of humanity and all these various intelligent agents, if they are referred to as such, software systems, hardware systems, and so forth, whether the aim and the goal of these systems are compatible. That is the alignment problem we will talk about. We will conclude by really thinking about how important it is to acquire knowledge at a vast scale and use this knowledge to guide humanity. And of course, all of that goes into our contributions to building a new civilization. And as Bob mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end, and I look forward to that as well. So the first thing to consider, elements of a conceptual framework. So the elements, so this has been taken from a statement written by the head of the Baha'i faith. There's an institution called the Universal House of Justice. It's an elected institution. It is situated on Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel. And what the House of Justice has done, so the House of Justice actually sits in close communication with the national spiritual assemblies in 180 some countries in the world, and those national assemblies sit in close contact with local Baha'i communities and local spiritual assemblies and so forth. So think of this as a network, global network that goes from the neighborhood to the city, to the region, to the country, to the continent, and then globally, and communicates it back and forth in a very coherent way. It is able to think as one soul in 8 million bodies and such. So the Universal House of Justice has positioned the Baha'i faith for now several decades to adopt a humble posture of learning and to operate in a mode of learning. Such, which is really unusual for a religious community to adopt this posture, but that is the posture of the Baha'i faith. And the framework that we want to describe also came not as a result of somebody thinking of some theory, but as a result of numerous social activities, efforts in trying to build communities in villages in India, in South America, in Asia, in Africa, in the conglomerate cities, in the metropolises of the West, in Europe and North America, and so forth. And the result of this learning process has been this framework that we want to talk about. This statement about infusing the spirit of Baha'u'llah's revelation should be read. There are different ways of reading it, but of course there is a religious component to it. But actually, we can think about this as a spiritualization of the planet, not so much worrying about the necessary theological aspects of one religion versus the other, but rather about the common humanity, the common religion. This is that changeless faith of God that Baha'u'llah speaks of, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. And so this framework is in the service of what? It's in the service of this vision that Baha'u'llah has said, that all men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. So, and so it's all men, not all Baha'is, all people, men and women, all people have been created by God to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. When we realize this, this is the foundation of the unity among all of us. Let us spend a few moments thinking about what does it mean to say that we have a framework. What is a framework? Many different ways of understanding it, but imagine a painter that is painting on a canvas, and the canvas is affixed to a usually wooden square that constitutes the framework. So the painter can paint anything he wants on this canvas, but he cannot go outside the framework. By going outside the framework, he loses his ability to paint. So if we use that analogy and think about a framework and say, so what can be a framework for action or for study? We will come in a moment and talk about the elements of this framework, but whatever those elements are, this framework cannot be so rigid. It is not about the list of do's and don'ts. As you will see, the elements, they are fundamental principles that can govern all of our lives individually and collectively. So if it is not rigid, then in what ways can it be flexible? So we refer to it as an evolving conceptual framework. Think about having a framework that dictates what to do and how to study and how to think about certain problems and so forth. And then ask yourselves, as we learn more, surely this framework itself can evolve. So it will evolve in the light of learning. So that's what we mean by an evolving, not a rigid conceptual framework. So the Baha'i community, how many millions they are actually living this. So this is not some conceptual, not some theoretical construct. This is a living thing. The Baha'i communities are organized in their localities or in their neighborhoods or in a group of communities together referred to as a cluster. And these clusters engage in a regular 3 monthly cycles in which they first study the reality, they consult, they read their communities, they plan lines of action, they act out those plans, and then they come back after 3 months and reflect on it and so forth. So this cycles of activity provides for a living, breathing, you breathe in and out, and that supports our life. And so this cyclical form of action, reflection, provides for the Baha'i community to continuously to learn, to adapt, to absorb new things, and so on and so forth. So I will talk about those new things in a minute when we talk about artificial intelligence. But let's, as I promised, let us think about these elements of our framework. What is the elements of our framework? So one of those elements is oneness. We believe in oneness of mankind, oneness of God, and oneness of religion. and maybe many other forms of onenesses, but at least those three. So we want this to be an element of our framework, meaning whatever we do should promote the oneness of humanity. If you say something or do something that brings division, discrimination, oppression, that's not going to last. That's not going to be good. That's not, then you're going outside of our framework and you cannot paint anymore. So whatever we say, whatever we do, whatever technology, whatever science, whatever ethics we develop has to fit within this underlying spiritual principle of oneness. Another one is justice. Very clear. So many people talk about justice. But we want to see justice actually implemented in human society. And how is it possible? Is the current forms of governance that we have in the world, does it lend itself to justice? If not, can we join hands as one human family on the planet and devise new mechanisms, new methods of governance that are global, that can bring about justice? We believe that there is truth, and that we all should encourage in our children and ourselves to love truth. And so this truth can be discovered, even though people have different perspectives, different views, different takes on reality. But through communication, through consultation, it is possible to express our love for truth by sticking with the fact, and that's what brings the Baha'i faith so close to all those disciplines of knowledge that are based on fact. So there's also this innate thirst for knowledge. There's an attraction to beauty. So these are all elements of our framework. Really, every one of these subjects can be the subject of a whole hour's talk. So I will not go through in great detail, but this posture of learning. And then let me say a few words about the twofold moral purpose. Every one of us, we have these twofold moral purpose in our lives, and that is to transform ourselves, to become better, to acquire skills, to acquire knowledge, to acquire beauty of one form or another, mostly internal, referring to our lives, our spirits, our minds, our hearts. And then also to realize that this our goal is not only to improve ourselves, but also to improve our society, our neighborhood, our environment, the community that we belong to. And more than just a twofold moral purpose is that the happiness, the well-being, the security of the individual is unattainable unless we have this element of also happiness, security, and for the whole society. So the best interests of an individual are served in the same way as the best interests of society. They are not divorced from each other. And we can define your society as your family. You can define it as your city. You can define it as your country. But the best definition would be to think of society as a global society. And so our allegiance is to the whole human family. All right. We can say really a lot about these elements, but maybe we'll come back. And of course, as we talk, if some things come to your mind, I'm sure you will jot down your questions, and we'll come to talk about those. Let's say a couple of things. If you have a framework, the framework should be consistent. You cannot say, I believe in oneness, but my business relies on creating divisions. Then your actions and your words are not coherent. So the framework has to be free from contradiction. We have to free ourselves from fragmentation, meaning, you see, reality is one. It's not fragmented. But when we want to study reality, naturally we have to specialize. We study physics, we study chemistry, we study biology. So we fragment reality. But we should always remember that this analysis, this separation of parts, should be complemented by a synthesis where we join them back together and say, what is the total reality? If you're doing farming, then there is a chemistry, there is a biology, there is a something from the soil science and so forth, but you have to combine them together. And this is true also in technology, in society, everywhere. So remember this, fragmented minds ask fragmented questions. They will receive fragmented answers because they ask fragmented questions. And this confirms for that person that reality is really fragmented. Fragmented minds ask fragmented questions, which confirms for them that reality is fragmented. So let's avoid that. So when we do that, we say that religion and science, of course, when we say religion, we're not talking about rituals or about the clergy. We're not talking about that at all. We're not talking about churchianity, not at all. We are talking about, or any other form of religious ecclesiastical order. We're talking about spirituality. We're talking about belief. If you look at inward, we have a inner reality. Other than our molecular reality, which is our body, we have an inner reality, which is quite distinct from our molecular reality. So when I say religion, I'm referring to that reality and what governs that reality. So it is one of the foundations of Baha'i principle, and I leave it for other speakers and other sessions to talk at depth about the harmony of science and religion, but it is unavoidable for us. In some sense, if artificial intelligence is science and ethics is born from religion, then coherence only will come if we are able to combine science and religion together. Many wonderful articles are written about this subject. Very clearly, we need to accept diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of race, diversity of nationality, and include everybody at the table so that we can combine these things together. It is true that technology has an imperative. You know, when you discover something, then you cannot avoid discovering the next thing. And this so-called technological imperative drives the technology in a certain direction. But we have to make sure that that technology is safe, it is secure, it supports the privacy of the individuals and so on. One notion is to think about, when we want to read the reality of a society, is to think about that it is made of these three: the individual, the community, and the institutions. And each one has a goal. Each one should move in a certain direction and should reinforce one another. None of them can achieve their ultimate goal, their existential goal, without support from the others. And the Baha'i view that the human history, as we go from humanity's childhood to adolescence to maturity, these two processes of integration and disintegration are at work. And we can see all around us. Every day we see things falling apart, wars starting, families disintegrating. And at the same time, we see a large number of people of goodwill coming together in consultation, in various agreements and so forth. You know, a century ago, nobody talked about war crimes. War was war. But now we ascribe crime to certain activities of war. So that is part of the process of integration. All right. Looking at my time, I better talk about artificial intelligence a little bit. Let me start from back when. Scientists, applied scientists, engineers were busy processing signals that comes from sensors, microphones and cameras, pictures and sound, speech, or that which we type on a computer keyboard in the form of a text. So processing the natural language or audio and so forth. So that is the engineering origin of signal processing, and looking for patterns. Sometime in the second half of the 20th century, an idea came about that maybe instead of just developing for algorithms that can analyze those signals and then produce something useful, maybe we can do something else. Instead of us engineering an algorithm, we can teach it to a machine. The machine is a network. Each element is inspired by the functioning of a neuron. and so a connection of them, many of them put together, will give you maybe it will be a line, a layer of many neurons, and then new neurons are connected to the next layer, and so you have multiple layers. And when the layers become large, you have a deep network, and a deep network can learn. And the way you teach the network is this. Let's say you want to teach the network to differentiate between dogs and cats. Very simple. So you show the pixels of an image of a cat, the actual values of those pixels, there are some number, right? Between 0 and 255. So you feed that the vector of those numbers, multiply them by some weighting, and then add these up and maybe add some nonlinearity and do multiple layers of this, and then some output comes out. Initially, the weights are all random. You don't know what the weights are. And so the answer will be wrong. You show a cat, and if the answer is not a cat, the answer is maybe something else. So then you say, okay, how far am I from the cat nest? And then you back propagate this through the model and assign and adjust the weights. And after some optimization, what you have is that now the network has learned, but it has not memorized. It has generalized. What this means is this. Now you show it a picture of another cat that this computer has never seen, and it is capable of correctly saying that this is a cat. Wow. This is the discovery of science, that many small elements of computation added together in this connectionist form can actually classify dogs and cats. And it can do so at the level of human accuracy, sometimes even better than human accuracy. And so when this is found, we say, can I do it with sound? Can I do it with language? Can I do it with text? And that's how in the recent years, meaning just the last few years, these large language models are born. And then, so I talked about artificial neural networks and deep learning, large language models and so on. Something new came out in 2014 that are called generative AI models in this framework of the neural network. These are the models that actually generate something. That means they make stuff up. So maybe you take a pen and or maybe a mouse and draw the outline of a tree and a sky and a car, and it will transform that into a realistically looking picture of a tree in a meadow and a road and a car and a sky. That is realistic. So you say, wow, I can generate stuff. So this was the origin of ChatGPT. Let me emphasize, as I explained this scientific part of this, the machine itself is a piece of silicon. It is actually, you already have it. It's probably in your pocket. It's an iPhone or a laptop. That's what the machine is. The machine itself is absolutely not conscious. It is not sentient. You may have heard some employee of some large company, after one model was published, said, oh, our model is sentient. And he was fired immediately. It is not sentient. In fact, some authors argue that the machine itself is not intelligent. And in fact, it's not even artificial. I mean, is your laptop, do you refer to your laptop, this is artificial laptop? No, it's a laptop. It's a machine. So think about this. We anthropomorphize. That means we, as though a disembodied form of human intelligence could exist, which exists in science fiction and in ghost stories and such. And now we ascribe that to this machine. But don't misunderstand me. The machine is very useful. You know, a calculator is very useful. It can calculate things so fast, better than most humans can do. But we shouldn't anthropomorphize it and say, wow, look at this calculator. Okay, so many areas of applications, depending on whatever your profession is. As you can see on the screen, that acronym MOOCs stands for Massive Open Online Course Systems. These are educational programs online. Stanford University offered the course. 600,000 people took the course. They did the homeworks. It was marked, and they Yeah, and they got their certificate. So you can eventually, through AI, we can provide a teacher for every student, a doctor for every patient, everywhere in the world, through the aid of these tools. So these tools can be very useful, but they can also be very harmful. So let's talk a little bit about the uses of this generative AI. First of all, let me talk about this electricity. Imagine human society 2 centuries ago or a little bit more, when electricity was not yet discovered or not used, till today. I understand that in Canada, a few years ago, one day internet went down, an entire city. It's not funny, you cannot buy anything anymore. Many of us walk in our wallets and we just carry credit cards, no cash. And so if the electricity is down, you cannot buy anything anymore. So we have become dependent on these, what we call societal infrastructure. Invention of AI in this 21st century is almost equivalent to invention of electricity. That means it will change everything. It will change our workflows. It will change the way accountants and lawyers and physicians and doctors and manufacturing and film and media and everything will change. So welcome to the future. It will change. You might as well get along with it, learn how to use it, and we should put guardrails so it is not abused. All right. You notice I do not read my slides. I hope that you do. So there are some concerns. Let's talk about these concerns. First of all, how it works. Similar to ChatGPT. You have to first start with a prompt. Either you ask a question, find me the person with a blue jacket. That's a prompt. There is an emerging discipline called prompt engineering. They can work in computer science area. They will not program in Python or C++ or whatever older language, Fortran, COBOL. No, you know what is the newest programming language? Wait for it. English. You can program these machines in English. So, so you start with a prompt, and some new content will appear. Could be music, could be video. You can feed it the script of a movie. And in a few years' time, maybe, an entire movie will come out that are photorealistic. That's what the whole strike about the actors was all about. So, what is the problem? So many good uses. What is the problem? The problem is this, that this new generative AI, this time I will read my point. This new generative AI sounds plausible. It sounds coherent on the surface because it sounds so human-like. But there's no guarantee that it will be. And it can churn out all kind of rubbish. It can give all kind of, and you may have read stories in the media of the lawyer who went to an actual court armed with AI the night before, and all the cases he was putting the numbers didn't exist. All right, so that is a problem, and that problem is, we admit there's a problem. We call it what? Generative AI. What does that mean? It means that the machine generates content. It means it makes stuff up. Don't rely on it. That is the ethics question. Because of this combination of the human-like language and apparent coherence, this is the deceptive part. And because it has this convincing realism, that is what it introduces a set of AI risks. So those are our problems. Privacy can be infringed. You do not know. So governments need to come up with regulation, as they recently did. In the US government recently came up with an executive order, not yet a law, that all AI-generated content must be watermarked. That means in a corner of it, you must say AI generated. to differentiate it from real, and that has to be enforced by law. There are problems of transparency. When an algorithm misbehaves, we go back and fix the algorithm. When deep learning neural network misbehave, we don't know where to fix it because we didn't engineer it. What we did is that we applied an optimization algorithm to reduce some mathematical function on an energy landscape. So we do not know how to fix it. That is a problem. So it is not explainable. Some people say AI must be, and there's a whole branch of AI called explainable AI, interpretable AI. So we need those guardrails. How are we doing with time? Okay, my time is getting short. So let me describe the alignment problem. If you use AI to recognize human faces or genders, by definition, this AI will be faulty. I will show you, because this is the case. When you train a neural network, you have to provide data to it. That data must come from natural sources, like the cats and the dogs, right? If in the world you had many, many, many more cats and only very few dogs, that network will be always biased to say everything is a cat. The bias is embedded in the data, not in the algorithm, not in the neural network, in the data. And if there is some race or some gender, some color of skin, some criminal record, something that is a minority, that minority will be discriminated against by definition. We know this. It's an established fact of science. Therefore, criminal justice systems should not use AI to predict which criminal, if we release them on a parole, that they will be repeat offenders and will come back to jail. That, and the history of AI, I'm afraid, is full of these misuses and abuses. So that is the problem. All right. Many more topics here, but in the interest of time, I will move on. AI is not evil. AI is like electricity. Yes, it can be used for evil. Put guardrails around it. How? Let me discuss about that. You see, what I explained in the beginning about the Baha'i community in millions of places, in towns, in small groups, in families, and so on. What they do is that they study, plan, act, then reflect and come back. That is the centrality of knowledge. We want all of humanity to join us in this. Nobody is talking about a religious conversion. We are talking about join hands. If you are a well-wisher of humanity, what I want to do is not to divide the society into advanced societies who make technology and the global south that is only a consumer of tech. No, that's not oneness of humanity. If you want oneness, then let us provide that you see, when a child is born, it doesn't matter which continent it is born. That child has the capacity to be a contributor to knowledge. Let's create the environment, the social environment, so the child can do that. Let's make knowledge the central process of social existence. Today, making money is a central process of social existence. Please, let us change that. The central process of social existence should be acquisition, this application, diffusion of knowledge. Knowledge for everyone, for all humanity, each according to their own capacity. Let us treat science and religion as two equal sources of knowledge for study and action, complementary sources of knowledge. Each knowledge, whatever we learn is a source of insight. So now the new insight is that, you know what? I can have a laptop with a GPU in it, and this laptop can generate content. You can write an essay and tell it to turn it into a video. and it will do it. Be realistic, very soon, or almost there. So this is a new insight. Let's make sure that there's enough guardrail so that we use it properly. Access to knowledge is the right of every human being, and participation in generation, application, and diffusion is a responsibility that all must shoulder in the great enterprise of building a prosperous world civilization. That is what we want to do. All right, let us see how we can contribute to building a new civilization. You see, what appears to be called for in any given region or micro-region or cluster of the world is the involvement of a growing number of people in a collective for learning, in a collective process of learning, one which is focused on dynamics of a path that conduces to the material and the spiritual progress. So progress should be both spiritual and material. Such a process would allow its participants to engage in the generation, application, diffusion of knowledge, a most potent and indispensable force in the advancement of civilization. These are some passages from the writings of Baha'u'llah, in the writings of the Baha'i community, regarding the importance of unity to make sure everybody can have access to knowledge. And I will conclude with this slide. That everyone should be involved, as I just said. All people should be involved. That means if you want, AI will not stay in North America. It will not stay with a few companies in Silicon Valley. AI will go everywhere in the world, just like cell phones went everywhere in the world. So let's make sure that everybody, according to whatever the circumstances is around them, that they can be able to implement it by not blindly as consumers. Let's not divide the world into producers and consumers. We know that this new discovery is potent, that it will change everything, that it will have unintended consequences. Therefore, let's put the ethical guardrails around it. The experience of the Baha'i faith in community building, in social action, and in public discourse offers a working model for all societies to achieve ethically coherent results. Then I have some references for you and so on. I will pause this share and go back maybe to Robert. If there are any questions, I will be happy to take those questions.
Great. Yeah, we have things beginning to pop into the Q&A and into the chat as well. And I want to remind people to please put everything in the Q&A. We may be able to put some things in the chat from YouTube, no, Facebook. I think we're being broadcast live over Facebook as well. So we may get some comments that way as well that we'll have to transfer them over. Thank you so much, Farzin. This is fascinating. And I'll start with a question myself while the other questions are coming in. This software you're talking about that's almost ready, where you could feed a script into it and it will give you a movie. Presumably that won't fit on a laptop. Presumably that requires a lot more computing power and a lot more storage. So we're talking about a whole new generation of computers that are going to be needed as well, so the hardware can handle the software.
Let me comment on it, if I may. So we know our laptops from the time that they used to be desktop. It had a hard disk. It had some power supply that you connect to electricity. And then the power supply was replaced and the battery was put in and it became laptop, right? There are many versions of these machines that have no hard drive on them.
Yeah.
There are also versions of these that have very little processing power on them. What they do is that they connect wirelessly through a wireless network that will connect to a data center. So your iPhone or your laptop is just the interface for a human to consume. The real computational node and the power that you're speaking of is in the form of a data center.
The cloud.
The cloud, exactly. So a number of companies have the cloud. There are public clouds there are private clouds, there are all kinds of things. So yes, it does require a massive amount, but remember that the computational powers available to humanity has doubled roughly every 18 months.
Yeah.
And has remained so for the last 50, 60 years. So that was the Moore's law. And then the Moore's law continues, but it is no longer at the same price or the same amount of power. So the challenges for the data center is to make sure that the cost remains within limit. And also there are now data centers that have zero carbon footprint.
Mhm.
And those are the ones that will contribute to sustainability.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
They must have to have huge solar panels and such because they use a lot of power and
That's right.
generate a lot of heat.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is-
Very good. Well, let me turn to our Q&A, which is now ballooned to 16 questions. So Christina says, the lack of guardrails is my biggest concern. I'm a higher education instructor, and I don't feel I can trust my students to not use generative AI to do their coursework and pass it off as theirs. And I don't trust Turnitin.com to catch when programs like ChatGPT are used to create their work. So I feel lost at how to handle this. Any insights?
What you pointed out is absolutely true.
Yep.
Absolutely true. So, right now, ChatGPT or equivalent of it and so forth are experimental. And they are just for, I think it ranked as the fastest adoption of any consumer product when it came on. How many millions of people adopted it within a few days, hours and days, and so forth. So right now, you're absolutely right that higher education has this challenge, this difficulty. I do not know of any immediate solution, but one can imagine that if regulation comes, that any generated system at the data center source, so you don't worry about your student. You go after the big companies and the silicon manufacturers and so forth that have the data centers and say, when you generate something in response to ChatGPT, watermark it that this is the AI generated content in such a way that the student cannot remove it. So now, how you can do that may be complicated and so forth. I understand, but maybe it calls for that if the previous model of education was controlled by the teacher and the student is presumed to be deceptive and cheater and tries to go, maybe the solution would be that before we start teaching them about English literature or about humanities or about math, that we teach them ethics when they are 5 years old and 6 years old and 7 years old, so that they understand that there is an inner guardrail in their own body. And many of us have those guardrails. Many of us professionals proud ourselves that I'm not a cheater, right? So if we can build this in students, that may be in fact the best. So challenges do come, and maybe the solutions also come about finding ways to, because really our education is mostly education for employable skills rather than life skills. I think life skills are equally, if not more important.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what I do, Christina. I require my students when they write an essay to quote me in my video or quote my PowerPoint. And ChatGPT doesn't have access to that. So, of course, they could always grab a ChatGPT thing and stick something in from mine.
Sure.
They could still do that, but it's a little more complicated. Debbie says, so it is already all over the world. I teach English online at a university not to be named. So far this semester, we have numerous essays written by AI. What is your recommendation how to deal with this? I guess we already answered that question.
Yes, I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, David says, thank you. Will you share your slides? The answer to that, well, we will put the slides up on the Wilmette Institute's page for this particular webinar. And the recording, of course, will be available on that page as well. So you'll be able to click through to the recording or click through to the slides if we get those from Farzin. And I think that was the plan. Daniel says, how can we avoid AI being exploited by a few who have more influence, money, and authority?
That's a very good question. You know, part of the reason why Baha'is work so hard in the neighborhood to try to build communities from ground up is that the existing, let me refer to it as old world order, is lamentably defective. So you are absolutely right that a few will exploit. But then if governments join hands and put the guardrails legally in place with teeth to enforce it, then it is possible for others also to make some contribution. So think about cell phone. So cell phone is such a wonderful invention, and obviously a few companies disproportionately benefit from that invention, right? But also many other people are able to use this device to enhance whatever is the reality of their own environment. So, I mean, taxation, regulation. Remember, we said individual, community, and institutions. They should work hand in hand. So if you have an economy that is free for all and is all individuals and corporations, then the negative effect will be quite obvious. But if you are able to then say communities give birth to institutions of governance, and these institutions can protect the interests of the collective, while at the same time providing for innovation and freedom of the individual in a balanced way, then hopefully we can come up with a solution. But I agree with you that the solution is not small, is not piecemeal, is not individual. And actually, this is the kind of problem that you cannot solve in one country. You know, like climate change is a kind of problem that you have to, is a global problem, and you have to address it globally.
Stephen, Mary Lou asks for a link from one of the slides, but she can get that once we have the slides up on the website. Stephen asked this question: could you talk a bit about engaging in discourse in the high-tech area? How do you engage in discourse about these?
Sure. So discourse is a very wide word that can span many things. As an individual, whatever your profession is, in your own professional environment, you can make some application to it. I used to teach engineering at a university, and I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it, but that's the only example I can share with you now. Is that at the departmental decision-making level, I suggested, this was many years ago, I was a young person at the time, I suggested that there is such a thing called consultation, and consultation has certain principles. And why don't we just, in the department, among the professors in the department and the head of department, why don't we just look at these things? For example, if I have an idea, I'll give my idea, but after I give my idea, I'm no longer attached to it. And so if after some discussion I become convinced that that was a silly idea, I'm okay to abandon it. So you see, simple things that we learn either by the study of the Baha'i principles or practices, for example, this consultation, because all Baha'i assemblies work on the principle of consultation. And the department decided to adopt it. Now imagine, instead of the chairman of the department, the head of the department dictating things and making people dissatisfied and so on, he had some elements. I'm not saying if it was perfect, but it was some elements of it. So that's what we mean by discourse impacting. In technology, I know of many technology companies that pride themselves that they are in fact, Silicon Valley is full of startups whose motto is that, whose mantra is that we want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, that gives you an opening to bring about ethics into your discussions in technology. But it is something that every one of you, every one of us will have to find out in our own environment and decide what is best. Learning these things and saying it in a way that comes across as open-minded, then more people are likely to accept.
Taraz says, please share some principles relating to the necessary guardrails to avoid exacerbating existing inequities in the world. And can you give a practical example?
Sure. So we know that some technologies related to AI, already we have experience that we know that they are harmful. So maybe the guardrail would be, let's say, injustice. I gave the example of prison systems, right? So we know where not to use. So use that knowledge in a very rapid cycle. I'm saying Baha'i community works in 3-month cycles, okay, in rapid cycles to learn and see what might work well according to principles and might not work well. So the principles of honesty, of loyalty, of privacy, of security, you're all familiar with all these principles. But then, as you said, to trying to use practical ways in which we can say what might work or might not work. I can give you 1 or 2 examples from my own experience. I can give you, let me give you 1 example. My own graduate studies for the doctoral degree, which was many moons ago, was to show mammographic images to the computer with the same layers of the neural networks to classify it as a pattern of microcalcifications on a mammogram as either benign or malignant. We could say this is a very good use of AI because you are helping this reduce unnecessary biopsies, for example, right? But we always insisted, even at that time, that the radiologist should be in the loop. This should be regarded as a tool in the hand of a radiologist who ultimately has the legal responsibility of declaring that you may or may not have a cancer. So this would be an example of using AI with the guardrail attached to the AI.
Layla says, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. How do you see AI as a force that will eliminate jobs? And what do you think is the best training for someone to get in this sector to help humanity?
Very good. One good news about the training is that there are a number of free or near free, for example, Coursera, where you can Google this and find out very good courses at the level of undergraduate or postgraduate that you can take for free and study. So that's in terms of education about it. The field, because there are truly thousands of universities and companies that put money behind this, and so the research is moving very rapidly, like month after month, things change. So you need to catch up with this. Sorry, was there a second part to the question other than learning?
Eliminating jobs. AI as a force eliminating jobs.
All right. Okay. So jobs always change, and then new jobs are born. So humanity had a different set of jobs when there was no electricity, and now we have a different set of jobs that today. So if you are a young person just finishing your degree, you should realize that, particularly in advanced technology, that whatever you learn at the university today has a half-life, probably about 3 years, and then it is no longer valid, right? But what you learn is communicating well, reasoning well, working with other people, solving problems, cooperation, a love for learning and cooperation. And in fact, companies that do not compete usually are more successful. Because the traditional theory in economics is that companies must compete. The company I work for actually openly says we never ever compete. If anybody just comes into our business area, we abandon it. We leave it to them because we have smart people who can solve unsolved problems in an area that nobody else has tried. So those are the idea. Sometimes it's referred to as the red ocean, blue ocean idea.
How can we what Cheryl asks us, how can we influence AI or ChatGPT to, quote, learn ethics? Should we ask ChatGPT to look up the Baha'i writings and references so it's exposed to more positive information?
I'm afraid ChatGPT already knows all the Baha'i writings. That means in the way the underlying model was trained, but by using the common crawl, it really scraped the entire internet and took all the text that was available on the internet and learned from that. That's why you can ask ChatGPT, write me an essay in the language of William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And he knows that because it has done. So yes, I think if there was an early version of these assistants, what they call personal assistant AI, that very quickly learned very bad language, and the company had to quickly shut that down because it learns from existing corpus of human discourse. So you go to all kind of websites, social media, and so forth, and you scrape that. If that is full of misinformation, it will learn misinformation. Yeah. That's why some people said you have to first ask ChatGPT to generate something, then you go check it against Google to see if it is true.
Hopefully, Google's not using ChatGPT to answer the questions too.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, someone actually asked ChatGPT to generate hidden words like Baha'u'llah's hidden words, and it produced some very weird hidden words, which sounded vaguely right, but were just
that was weird. My point. That was my point about deception and appearance of coherence, appearance of plausibility. But so much of it can really fool us. So we have to be careful. Correct.
Danny says, what are some positive practical uses of AI in community building work within a neighborhood? Are you aware of any? Such as using AI statistical systems to be more systematic with reading our reality, for example.
I have not seen it in any use. There may be some uses of it, but if your aspiration is that instead of going and making a home visit, instead of creating a real human chat at somebody's kitchen table, sipping coffee and talking about ethical principles and spiritual teachings of Baha'u'llah, there is no AI tool that can replace that. So one of the guardrails would be to make sure that AI remains where it belongs.
That's interesting. Let's see. Adib says, what forums exist today where ethical solutions for AI are explored? The last instance that I recall was Google's effort via Timnit Gebru's research. In essence, aside from government, are there arenas in private and public sector exploring the ethics of AI?
The answer is yes. Many companies have a number of their employees that are focused on that. Because we know in the society there's a discussion about the ethics of AI. Companies that especially those that generate models. So if I may divulge this, in the company I work for, we have working with our lawyers and working with our ethicists. We hire individuals that are ethicists to help us craft statements to say this model should be used in these cases and not used in these other cases. So trustworthy AI is a flag, a mark that is stamped on various models that come in computer vision or in speech processing and so on. So trustworthy AI, ethical AI is a thing. So if you are involved in that, make sure that whoever gives you a system or a model ask the right questions about ethical statements.
That's fascinating. Sarv says, hello, Farzeen. You provided a parallel between cell phones that were once built in a centralized part or parts of the world. However, they spread throughout the world. The world did not participate in the development and application of the technology of cell phones. How can we anticipate that humanity will be participating collectively in the development in a more ethical AI worldwide?
Yes. So there are, so let me explain this. If I may name a company, let's say Intel. Shall we take that? Okay. So they manufacture silicon. They design and manufacture silicon, and then that silicon is embedded in some electronic system, right? Often they use the latest CPU in order to design the next generation of CPU. And they may have access to some things that they have not commercialized. So they have this unfair advantage. That's why other companies, maybe even other countries, cannot, in this sense, compete, right? Why? Because so in AI is like that. A company that generates AI, one of its first uses is, can I use this AI to make the next chip? So is only, and because only they have it. This is also the same in universities. You know, a university in science department, you have certain skill, human skill,
right.
Because you have that human skill. So if you are at the frontier of science, you can go. So what society needs to do is this. Society needs to say that abandoning people to the market forces is not an ethical thing to do. We like market forces in order to help people innovate and go forward, but there has to be some moderation. And so, for example, okay, maybe it's hard to make the chip that goes inside a cell phone, but many uses and applications exist in software development in multiple languages around the world, hundreds of languages around the world, that these big companies are not doing. And if that is the case, then we can create startup culture in many parts of the world that is generally referred to as the global south, that can take advantage. Maybe they cannot do the integration circuit, but they can certainly do the software part. And so there are avenues that can. And if we had a world government, then we would see, in the Baha'i faith, we say, if a cluster reaches 1,000 core activities, their victory is our victory. We're not competing. Their victory is our victory. So the fact that some companies can make advanced AI, if they do not abuse this position, if they use it, somebody invented internet, right? And then this internet is now benefiting everybody. Yeah. And so that's fine. So a combination of public-private joint venture or some kind of a global forum in which knowledge can move. You see this question of the knowledge and who has it and who uses it and so on is intimately connected with the concept of power right. and how power is used in the world. So if we want justice in the world, we have to allow that knowledge can move in all kinds of spheres. I think it's right.
That's very good. Victor says, how do we ensure that our moral and spiritual development matches the pace of our rapid technological progress? I suppose the answer to that is good luck.
No, not good luck. Invest in it. We invest in material development, right? How much do our countries, our societies, how much do we invest in ethical education, in ethical discourse? So, really the people to be blamed for this are the religious leaders of the world who have used religion as a means of division, disunity, that their emphasis on their theological abstraction, whatever, it has been a cause of wars and of pulling people apart. When religious leaders of the world can unite, then it is possible to then invest. We have teachers for math and science. Why can't we have teachers that teach people all kinds of things regarding the subject of ethics itself? Should be a valuable subject to study. And by the way, in the Baha'i children classes, and in the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, we invest on spiritual and material education in parallel. So there is a book that talks about ethics, and there's also a book that talks about numbers. So 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, that in those neighborhoods where the Baha'is are active, and that's not all the neighborhoods of the world yet, but it is well spread throughout the world. It is spread in such a way that it is beyond, that nobody can uproot it. You know, in Iran and the persecution of the Baha'is of Iran, scholars are saying that the Baha'i faith cannot be decapitated because it has roots in the grassroots of the people. Right. So in those neighborhoods where this exists, we can see the new world civilization is being built one child at a time to learn about ethics and science together.
Excuse me. Whitney says, how do we get around the limitation you mentioned of the data input for AI to learn upon, given that there are so many aspects of our society which embed injustice and bias into the media, publishing, technology, etc.? What kind of guardrails can we put onto AI development to work against the reinstantiating of this old order?
Yes, very good point. So I do not know, but as one suggestion would be that every research lab in every university that is developing AI, whose application is to the society, not just science, but to the society, right? So if you are using it for community building, if you're using it for education, if you're using it for health, if you're using for what, I don't know, maybe there's nothing that we can exclude, but every research group, other than scientists, specialists, should also have ethicists, so that they can still talk about that and say, what is the spiritual principle? How are we going to make sure that this model will be of benefit to humanity? And investing in that, hiring people, paying salaries to them who sit down and think through these things, and as part of the discourse. And the government should incentivize, just like we're incentivizing green energy, we can incentivize ethical AI.
That's interesting. By the way, we still have 23 questions. We've gone through about 19. And I think we can keep on going, considering that while the audience has shrunk, we still have a lot of interesting questions here. And I think we still have 163 people listening. So I think we might as well continue. Dennis says, your presentation looks like a syllabus for a college course. Is there such a course available?
I am not aware, but I would be happy to collaborate. Some time ago, I used to be an adjunct professor at the California State University, and I offered a course with the title Professional Development, and its subjects was lifelong learning, collaboration. And the reason why university wanted this course was because the accreditation bodies had said that your students are very good in math and science, but they're not very good in these soft skills. And so I offered a course on soft skill. This was a pro bono work that I did for them. And so I have some experience in teaching a course. That course lasted 3 years, and then I moved, and so it came to an end. But if there are anybody in the audience who is interested to teach, I will collaborate with you. I will hand you not only the note of the course, the questions, the projects, the whole shebang. It was a proper university course that was based on similar ideas that what we are talking about. So I will be delighted to collaborate with anybody who's interested. I just don't have the time myself. I just don't have the time myself from my work to be able to teach it. Yeah.
Of course. An anonymous attendee says, is there any guidance on the use of AI?
There is no guidance that I know of. It would be in the writings of the Universal House of Justice. It may exist because, you know, the House of Justice writes to individuals who ask questions. There's no guidance in the writings of the central figures of the Baha'i faith because there was no AI at that time, obviously. But whether the House of Justice has made some some statements about it. I'm not aware. What I am aware of is the Institute for the Studies for Global Prosperity. Those young people, mostly young Baha'is, university students who participate in the courses of ISGP, while it's not directly related to AI, at least the time that I was involved with it, but it strongly talks about harmony of science and religion. And so by extension, you could say, will provide principles to regulate AI.
This is an interesting question. Farzine says, will AI be able to genuinely help us conceive of an ethical framework for its own functioning?
Sure. So where does the framework that I spoke of can evolve, right? So you can apply the framework to any, to community building in a neighborhood. You can apply it for various kinds of endeavors and so forth. So those who are developing AI or applying AI to some need in the society can certainly begin to think in terms of what is the framework within which I work. And just thinking about a framework and making sure the ethics are in place distinguishes you from people who are feverishly trying to make money by making the next gizmo using AI, So injecting this, that as a scientist or as an applied scientist, an engineer, you should think about the end-to-end system, which includes its impact on society, its impact on inequality in the society and such. So the answer is yes, a framework can be articulated.
Sarv has commented additionally here. He says, much of my work relies on me shooting video, creating content, editing, producing, and the like. When you said AI is here and we have to learn how to use it, my pushback is I don't want AI to disrupt the creative process I employ. What is your thought about this?
Sure. So you should, just because email came, papers didn't disappear. So my guess is that AI will expand and will apply and will disrupt many existing jobs and so forth, but it will also provide opportunities. And at the end, there still exist horses and buggies, even though the numbers are much smaller, of course, right? So the old and the new will survive together. The creative juices, if I may say, of humanity should be allowed free to function. Use AI as an additional tool rather than as a delegation that, okay, you go make the movie or you go write the story. Actually, I'm not sure if it will make very good original stories. So the original, you see, the prompt engineering part, that part is the human part. That means you decide what you want to do. This thing will help you do it faster and better.
Aaron has a long comment here, which is kind of interesting. Thank you for your presentation. How can we create a complementary relationship between humanity and machines? By complementarity, I mean that people remain indispensable for value creation and retain bargaining power in labor markets and in political decision-making. Companies who have access to machines with capabilities that replicate those of humans for a given task can and often replace humans in those tasks, creating the risk of concentrating wealth and power. How can we strike a balance between automation and augmentation in AI-powered systems to create prosperity for many, not just a few?
That's right. So that is the goal. Once we know the goal and we know the elements of our framework, then a discussion of this kind, you see. So again, I'll go back. If governments do nothing in the wild west, the individuals will run amok. So your question is how. The solution is that we should influence our communities, our societies, and our governments to create such regulation as to try to minimize. So, for example, in the older times, we used to say progressive taxation. There are some societies, the Nordic countries, for example, right, that you implement progressive taxation as a means to make, of course, their communities are small, 10 million people, 15 million people there like that, right? But they have successfully shown that governments can bring up the level of education, create a set of ethics in the society, that it does not exacerbate and those societies that don't and just abandon people to the forces of the market, naturally it will diverge. Inequality will increase.
Yeah.
I thought I read a book called Inequality for All. So
we're already there.
You're already there. You're already there for that. Right.
But I'll give a follow-up question to this. Can you envision, let's say in 2075, a dystopia where 30% of the population of the United States is unemployed because the jobs they had been doing no longer exist, because training was never provided to them, because a welfare-like living wage is provided to people who are unemployable, so they can live without working, and 2/3 of them have drug problems or alcohol problems because of their despair.
Right. So sometimes we imagine that the world remains static and only one element of it will advance. This is not the case. Everything will change. So 2 centuries ago, a large number, I don't know, 90%, 70%, I do not know exact number, of people lived on the farm and produced the food.
Right.
And then farms were mechanized, and now less than 5% need to do that. And even those 5% still have cars and phones, and so they're not impoverished villagers like in some parts of the world. Did the rest of the people become unemployed because the farms become mechanized? They became unemployed from working on the farm, but then they could go and publish books, or they could go and make music. So this idea of if productivity of let's take the example of manufacturing. If we can increase the manufacturing productivity so that fewer and fewer people work in manufacturing, and robots do most of the manufacturing work, the design element is separate. The humans can do the design part.
Mm-hmm.
The actual manufacturing of that design article is done by robotic factories. May very well be like that. If Amazon has delivery robots that are self-driving and is successful and doesn't have false ramification, maybe all those, you see, still wealth is generated. If that wealth is distributed equitably, then all those current employees of Amazon that are lifting up boxes and putting them on trucks and so forth, they can spend their time learning something.
Yeah, maybe from AI professors that don't cost as much money too.
Sure. So I think the point is this, that to bring about love, unity, justice in the society requires us to anchor ourselves in those fundamental principles. And once we are anchored, we are smart enough to find the ways of how to do that. So if we see evil in the world, it's because we have unmoored ourselves from our spiritual reality.
I want to sort of skip through some of these questions because we probably need to stop in a few minutes. We're coming up on, we're at 84 minutes after we got started. So we probably need to start about minute 90 or so. Doug has an interesting question. What do you think about training students to use AI as a tool, helping them to learn when it's useful and when not, emphasizing the importance of honesty and transparency in its use, as opposed to trying to eliminate its use by students? I think you've already partly addressed that.
Yes. We know AI will come. We can't shut it out. We can delay it by 3 years through some labor contract, but it's coming. So we might as well know how to use it properly. So introducing it at an early. I remember there was a time where students were forbidden, maybe they still are, from carrying a calculator to school with them. So no, you embrace it, use it, and then adjust your curriculum in order to achieve the desired result.
Roberto says, do you envision large language models being modeled with the principles of ethics of the faith, sort of artificial intelligence working to teach the faith? I'm not sure if that's two questions or one, but
Yes, I do not know about teaching it, but large language models, because they are trained on the entire corpus of digital text, they are already aware of that. So, actually, in many ways, if people of goodwill, Baha'is included, if people of goodwill create websites and put lots of content on it, or go onto social media and just flood the thing with the sentences or ideas and constructs that are for the betterment of the world, AI will get better because because and particularly if then the regulation of the government really forces social media companies to exclude disinformation, then AI also will not pick up this disinformation. You
yeah.
can think of it as an AI as some virtual child of humanity that has to be trained in this society. So clean up the society and AI will be good.
Huh, interesting. David says, can AI be used to help us with the climate crisis?
Yes, definitely. The climate crisis can be solved in numerous ways, technical and otherwise, and AI can certainly assist with that. Not only generative AI, even the deep learning part, the analytical AI. We can think of AI as three ways, right? I think I mentioned it: conversational, analytical, or generative. So the analytical AI can be used for pattern recognition, for classification, for all kind of um, yeah. So
Or searching for patterns, yeah, or
searching for
climate,
pattern. Correct.
the
Correct.
climate. Rob says, what is he notes that the US is slow and Europe, the European Union is faster at implementing things like guardrails. Will AI be exploited for a long time before we have any guardrails?
So, well, as we know, an executive order came out a week ago or something like that in US. Europe is also considering it. You usually are more deliberative, and they will come up. The GDPR, the General Data Privacy regulations in Europe exist, and many companies in US, even though there is no GDPR in law in US, many companies in US, because they are global companies and they do business in Europe as well, they observe that voluntarily. So
Yeah.
it is not true that all corporations always trying to run away from. No, many of them they want to make money while acting ethically, and that is possible. So whichever company if we are in, we use our voices. That will be part of our discourse.
Jim has an interesting comment. He says, I'm a medical provider currently writing a medical manual, and I have found ChatGPT to be very useful in generating signs and symptoms, medical history questions, first line medical treatments, step-by-step process for procedures, starting an IV, etc. In other words, I ask questions that I've already been trained to know the answers, and I use the ChatGPT to confirm what I know on the topic or to prompt questions I may have forgotten to include in the medical history. I find that I must double check everything to confirm accuracy. However, despite this, it is an excellent tool.
I second that comment. He is a good example of a very good use of AI in the hands of somebody who both knows the facts and therefore is not fooled, and also then uses the tool in an appropriate way. So all power to you, and I hope many more people can use that. There is no doubt in my mind that in X number of years to come, nearly everybody will use AI in one way or another to help their profession.
We have two questions here about how AI can be used to help with the activities of the Baha'i community and whether it can be used to ultimately to unify the world.
Maybe that's a bit too much to ask AI to unify when we are disunited. Asking the robots to try to put us in our correct place. That's probably a bit too much. I think I will say this: let us not be dazzled with technology. We use technology in the service of community building, but let us not imagine that technology has the solution. Humans have the solution. Technology helps us implement it with less pain.
Well, that's well said, and we're now at the bottom of the hour, so perhaps that's our good last comment. And it appears most of the remaining questions are thank you very much, and thanks as usual for a brilliant talk, and these kinds of comments. So I certainly want to echo our question and answer audience exactly that way. You have given us a lot to think about today, and a whole new perspective on this whole problem of artificial intelligence and what to make of it, and for that matter, how to use it and how not to use it. I was really unaware of a lot of this, and I'm very grateful to you, Farzin, for all this information. So turning back to my audience, I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining the Wilmette Institute's webinar today. We hope that you will share some of these ideas and this information that you've heard with your friends in conversations with others. Please also tell others about the Wilmette Institute's regular webcasts. We look forward to seeing you again at a future webcast. Goodbye and good night.